I write and read a lot about the creative process, and I read a really interesting research paper that said the only times in our lives when the six most pleasurable neurotransmitters are released at once is when we are in a state of creative flow. So you know that feeling. It doesn't happen very often when you are just in the zone, and the ideas are coming through you and time falls away. And it's really, really beautiful. It's a lovely thing. And I think it's probably why most of us as creative people do what we do. But there is a flip side. And you two, I'm sure, are familiar with that crushing self doubt, the horrible, creeping sensation of imposter syndrome, and that little voice in the middle of the night, that creative demon that whispers in your ear, Richard, you are rubbish. You're just a bit shit. You know that thing you did today when you put the deck on at the end, right at the beginning of the webinar? That was terrible. You should never do another webinar again. We all know this voice, don't we? And it is, alas, just as much of the part of the creative process as creative flow. So today I would like to share some observations with you on the question of creative confidence, and in particular, what to do when it disappears. 8 observations, and the first one, which I hope is reassuring, is that you're not alone. Let's do the quiz. It's Friday, sort of like, pub quiz day, isn't it? Maybe you've got a nice cold pint of beer in your hand right now. If you have, cheers. My painting is dead. I am not in the right place. I am not a painter. This was said by one of the greatest artists in the history of modern art. Hello, Stephen. Good to have you here. Who said, my painting is dead, I'm not in the right place, I'm not a painter? Any guesses in the chat box? I'll give you a clue. Marcel Duchamp, good guess, Marco. Thanks for getting the ball rolling. He was Italian, though, not French. So not Van Gogh, although we will return to Van Gogh. Might have been Van Gogh. He was assailed by self-doubt. Raffaello, Michelangelo, bingo. Well done, Nick. Nick wins the first prize of the day. Yeah, so Michelangelo, when he's in the middle of painting the roof of the Sistine Chapel, which is one of the most astonishing works of Western art, if indeed not the entire history of human art, when he's in the middle of painting that, he wrote to a friend, my painting is dead. I'm not in the right place. I am not a painter. I am very poorly today and very stupid and hate everybody and everything. One lives only to make blunders. This was a Victorian dude with a big beard who went on a journey to some islands. Come on, Nick. Jill, boom. Jill straight in there. It was Charles Darwin. Nick was almost there, but Jill wins round 2. Yeah, this was Charles Darwin after he'd written The Origin of the Species, which is a book that changed everything. It changed our entire understanding of the Earth and our place in it, and indeed science. And even after writing that great book, he felt he was very stupid and he hated everybody and everything. One more. The exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler. Okay, this was another, this is a 20th century scientist as well, who one could say had a similar impact to Darwin. Rich, good work. Matt comes in close there with Einstein too. Yeah, you guys are good. Nice one, Rich. So I think what's that? Rich, Jill, and Nick. You guys need to get together and start an online pub team. Yeah, this was Albert Einstein, and this was after he discovered the theory of relativity. So, if you are feeling a bit shit about your own creative endeavours, know that you are in the very best of company. Now, my Second observation today may surprise you, and it is this: a little self-doubt can be a very good thing. I've got a number of favorite quotes about the creative process, and I will have bombarded some of you with them on LinkedIn and my Instagram page, and indeed my workshops. But this is one of my all-time favorites, the Irish novelist Anne Enright, whose books are excellent. Do buy and read Anne Enright's books. She said in an interview, only bad writers think that their work is really good. And I love this very much, you know, and I found it to be true. And indeed, there is a phenomenon that psychologists have observed called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And this is the phenomenon whereby people who are less competent than the mean think they are more competent, and people who are more competent consider themselves less competent than they actually are. And I think that if you think your work falls short, then that generally suggests you have the vision and talent to grow, to develop, because you can see where the issues are. If, on the other hand, you think your work is fucking great and perfect and flawless, chances are you are deluded and there is no development there. Another thing that's particularly important in the context of creativity is that experiencing self-doubt is a good indicator that you're pushing yourself into the kind of uncomfortable territory, the territory of the unknown, where the really good stuff is likely to happen. I was reading another interview with this time with Grayson Perry, and he said, if you don't have self-doubt, you're not trying hard enough. You know, a little bit of self-doubt is a good indicator that you're putting yourself in a slightly uncomfortable position. That's where you have to be to make the good stuff, because creativity is all about doing things that haven't been done before. 2 videos today, and I'm going to attempt to stop sharing the deck, and I'm going to play you this video of David Bowie talking about this principle.
The other thing I would say is that if you feel safe in the area that you're working in, you're not working in the right area. Always go a little further into the water than you feel you're capable of being in. Go a little bit out of your depth. And when you don't feel that your feet are quite touching the bottom, you're just about in the right place to do something exciting.
I love that. Just a little bit out of your depth. And that's a good space to be. The difficulty, of course, is there are those times in one's creative life where you're not just a couple of inches off the bottom, you're out there in the storm-tossed ocean, floundering, not waving, but drowning. And I think self-doubt is a little bit like Goldilocks porridge, you know? There's a good place to be, but if you have not enough self-doubt, then you are complacent or deluded. And if you have too much, it's crippling. You can't make anything at all. So the trick is to avoid these big peaks and troughs and try and modulate that wave so you're somewhere in the middle. Of course, it's a wave, isn't it? You know, there are those days you wake up and you think, yeah, I can do this. And then other days where you think, what on earth am I doing in this job? Who made me a creative director? I haven't a fucking clue what's going on. A couple of things that can help. The first one I call the pep talk technique. And this is, you know when you're really in the thick of it and your brain is frazzled and you've not been sleeping and you're stressed and strung out and other little voices in your head are particularly loud. A friend of mine calls them head badgers. What you do is you sit down, have a cup of calming mint tea, and you get a piece of paper and you write down the issues as simply and straightforwardly as you can. And then you imagine a good friend of yours coming to you with the issues you've written down. What would you say to them? And I think this exercise is really helpful. One, it stops this sort of cacophony in your head and it breaks it down step by step. And the other thing is, just by going through that sort of psychological flip of imagining the issues are not yours, but somebody else's, you're able to come up with solutions that you were not prior to doing the exercise. Here's another phenomenon. We are, as human beings, particularly human beings brought up in Yorkshire, as I am, um, attracted towards the negative. You know, we have this negativity bias. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes people say nice things about my work. And I just kind of go, oh, that's a nice thing. Forget it. And occasionally somebody will criticize my work, and wow, boom, it's like it's been laser cut into my brain. I started doing a thing about 3 years ago that somebody else put me onto, and it's really helpful. I call it the pick me up folder. So now, whenever I get a nice message about one of my workshops or talks or the book, which is available in all good bookshops, I've got a folder on my desktop, and I call it nice messages, and I just stick the nice messages in there. And over time, I've built up quite a few of these, and now, whenever I'm feeling shit or something's not gone right, or I'm just under the weather, I'll open this folder and I just have a quick look. And sometimes do it before I've got to give a talk, and I just go, oh yeah, okay. Today I may be feeling terrible, but you know what? In the past, I did this thing. I did it well enough for somebody to send me a message. I can do it again. The pick me up folder. Okay, number 3. You have a world. Oh, Stephen said he loves this image, which I presume was the Johan Deckman image of the 2 books. Johan Deckman, he's on Instagram. He's great to follow. He's a designer, and he does these lovely visual metaphors that are often to do with the creative process. Well worth a follow. Number 3, you have a world-beating advantage. Would you like me to tell you what your world-beating advantage is? This is audience interaction. AI, Daniela says. No, it's not AI. Yes, of course. Well, I will. But first, I'm going to tell you, well done, Kate. I think you've been here before. I'm going to tell you a story about tennis first. So I'm quite old now. I'm 51 years old. And when I was growing up, there was a tennis player called Boris Becker. He was amazing. And for a little while, nobody could beat him. And the reason nobody could beat him was because he served faster than anybody else had done in the history of tennis. Boom, ace after ace after ace. And he was looking pretty unbeatable. The other players on the Grand Slam circuit thought, right, okay, we got to try and improve the speed of our serves too. So they all went down the gym and they worked with coaches, and they attempted to serve as fast as Boris Becker did. Apart from this guy. And as Eleanor has correctly predicted, it is Andre Agassi. And we see across these 2 photos the evidence of time's cruel hand. And it is sort of quite weird. As I look at the screen now, my head sits in between these 2. Yes, nothing wrong with a bit of baldness, is there? I'm sure we got some bald people on the call. Hello to my bald brethren. Anyway, so Agassi was not a particularly physical guy. He wasn't that big, and he was smart. He knew that it was a fool's game to try and beat Boris Becker at this thing at which he was incredible. So Andre Agassi retired to his sofa with a big stack of DVDs, and on those DVDs was every single televised serve Boris Becker had ever made. And after a few hours of watching these tennis matches, Agassi noticed something that nobody else had noticed. When Boris Becker was about to serve, just as he threw the ball up in the air, his tongue would stick out the front of his mouth, just a little bit. And it would generally speaking be down the middle or to one of the sides. And if his tongue was on the middle or to the right, it meant that the ball would go to his opponent's left. And if his tongue was to the left, it meant the ball would go to his opponent's right. Agassi says that as soon as he'd worked this out, the hard thing was not beating Boris Becker. He could do that anytime he wanted, but not beating him so often that Boris Becker knew something was up. And he went on to win the next 9 out of their 11 Grand Slam matches that they played. There's a nice story that he tells. A few years ago, he confessed to Boris Becker at Oktoberfest, the beer festival in Munich. And he said Boris Becker nearly fell off his stool. Becker said to him, I used to go home and tell my wife, it's like he reads my mind. It's a lovely story, I think, of not playing the same game as everybody else, recognizing your own particular strengths, working with your own unique vision and playing to those instead. There is a lovely line from Dr. Seuss. Today you are you, that is truer than true. There is no one alive who is youer than you. And this is your world beating advantage. There isn't really any such thing as an original idea. There are new ways of executing ideas, but the ideas are the ideas. But what you do have, what you do bring to it, is the absolutely unique thing that you have, which is your lived experience. And the truer you can be to that, the better your creative work becomes. So recognize that, and we're all messed up on the inside, and we've all got the head badges, and we've all done things that we regret, and sometimes we're stupid, and sometimes we're great, but we are who we are. So stop looking over your shoulder. So easy these days with social media and LinkedIn to go, well, they're doing what I do, but they're doing it a million times better. Bah, there's always going to be somebody with a bigger boat. Don't try and be somebody else. Imposter syndrome is often about trying to be somebody else rather than just being who we are. Remember this from Rick Rubin, whose book is brilliant on the creative process. Anybody read Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, which is, no, just there over my shoulder? Fiona, yeah, it's a really good book, highly recommended. He says, look for what you notice, but no one else sees. And I think that is the trick, That is the way in to a great idea, is mobilizing that lived experience, that unique perspective, and try to see things a little bit differently. And Rich has read the Beastie Boys book, which is quite conspicuous over there. So if you're feeling a bit lost, here is another tip. Follow your fascination. I got this from the Norwegian novelist Karl Ove Knausgaard. Follow your fascination. I really love that, Even in the maelstrom, you have a sense of what speaks to you, what motivates you, and follow that thing without judgment or without fear of where it will lead you. Number 4. Is to do something daily. So I'm here in South Wales and the sun is shining, which I've not been able to say for about a year, it seems, but it is. And up on the hill over there is a pond. I like to run. And whenever I run past this pond, I take a photo of it. And I've been doing this a long time. And I photograph it because I run at different times of year and different times of day. I've got literally hundreds of photographs of this pond, and it was only a little while ago that I thought, well, I'll try and put some of these images together, partly to make the point that I'm making in this webinar. I thought, this is actually look quite nice. I'm quite pleased with these photos of the pond. And the important thing really, though, is not the photos of the pond, but it is what taking the photos of the pond made me do. It's a really simple, daily-ish creative practice that doesn't have any meaning. I didn't do this because I was going to show the pictures to anybody, although I recognise that I have done now. But it's just a thing, and I just do it for the sake of it. And it forces me to slow down and look, just to take a moment and just stop and look and observe and see which trees have no leaves and whether there's a duck and how much water is in the pond and these kind of things. Daniela does it for Gunnersbury Park. I'd love to see him, Daniela. Maybe email me some afterwards, or if you put them somewhere. So this again, if you're stuck or you're having a shit time, little projects like these can be really good at getting you unstuck. So maybe you could do something like me and Daniela and just photograph the same thing you pass every day. Or you could set yourself a scavenger hunt. So my friend, the artist Daniel Etok, whenever he sees a car that's been repaired with a door panel or a bonnet that's a different colour to the rest of the car, he takes a photograph, something like that. Or a really lovely one, which is in Rob Walker's book, is you set yourself the task of photographing the numbers from 1 to 100. So after this webinar, the next time you see a 1, you photograph it. And then you're on to 2. And when you've seen a 2, you keep your eyes open for a 3. And it's a great way of making you notice things in the environment that you wouldn't have noticed, and just getting you out of your head in a legal, non-narcotic way, and probably a healthier way too. We could talk about mushrooms, but that would be a whole different webinar. This is the book by Rob Walker. It's called The Art of Noticing. It looks a bit cheesy, but it's really, really good. He also does a mailer, so you could go to his website after the webinar and sign up, and you get like weekly tips. You could also try the morning pages. Does anybody do the morning pages? This is a thing that was recommended in this kind of classic book about creativity by Julia Cameron, a screenwriter, called The Artist's Way. Savas Zinonos has done the same thing for the tree in front of his window, and he's done The Artist's Way too. Amazing. Thank you, Savas. I'm going to say a Faristo Gamble. So the morning pages, for those of you who don't know, is pages you write every morning. You write 3 pages. You write them longhand. You don't read them back. You don't show them to anybody, and you do them every day. That's what she says. I generally do them about 3 times a week, and it's become a thing. In fact, they're all here. They're just down there. I thought I'd photograph them. It's really interesting. You know, I scribble like, you know, so my pages are not that full, but I found that it gets stuff out of my head. It's like a little personal therapy. And by doing it in the morning, a lot of those noises and voices and things that are bugging me, that I didn't even realize are bugging me, I get down on paper, and it's like I get them out of the way. And occasionally, because I'm not writing without worrying, I write something and go, oh yeah, that's actually quite good. I wrote one with the pen running out, and then the pen started working again, and then it ran out again, and the whole thing became about whether this pen was going to run out or work, and how that was kind of a metaphor. And if you're stuck, it's a really nice thing to try, and you can find out more about it online. Another that would be telling, Nandita. It's whatever comes into your head, and she says in the book, even if you write, I've got nothing to write about, that's fine too. But I found it becomes more like a confessional. You know, it's more honest than a diary. And if you're feeling shit and really struggling to get started on a particular project, another tip is to aim low. So very often, you know, we feel this obligation really to try and make something as good as it can possibly be, and that can be crippling, and it can stop you getting going. It can lead to procrastination. So I'm a big fan of just getting the most basic response to the brief done and out of the way, and I think that's healthy because it forces you to start to think about what's important in the process. And as soon as you've got going, you've kind of broken that inertia. And you also know that you can relax, because like, even if you've got a hand in or present this thing and it's not great, it's not terrible either. It's just a boring version of what might be, but it gets you started. So don't worry so much about aiming high, aim low, and just keep going. Number 5, it's quiz time. Jill and Rich and Nick, are you ready? Fingers on buzzers. Opinions are only ever just opinions. This came from a review by Jack Gould in the New York Times in 1956. There's your clue, my friends. X, I've redacted the name, has no discernible singing ability. His specialty is rhythm songs, which he renders in an undistinguished whine. His phrasing if it can be called that, consists of the stereotyped variations that go with a beginner's aria in a bathroom. For the ear, he is an unutterable bore. And I saw a few Sinatras, but Duleka, I hope I'm saying your name right, Duleka says, Elvis, you've just graduated to the pub team. Yeah, it was Elvis. And boy, did Jack Gould get it wrong. Sinatra was a good guess. Well done, Duleka. Okay, you got one more. Can't act, can't sing, slightly bald, can dance a little. Can't act, can't sing, slightly bald, can dance a little. Fred Astaire. Good work, Jill. Matt says Mr. Blobby. Andre Agassi. And Angus says me. Nice. Yeah, it was Fred Astaire. These were the studio notes from his first screen test. And of course, he went on to be this incredible star of the screen, but also a very well regarded singer with that kind of unique voice of his. Guitar groups are on their way out. This was famously said by Mike Smith at Decca Records when he chose not to sign. Bill's got it again. Deleka's in shortly afterwards, and Elena, ciao Elena, says the Beatles. Guitar groups are on their way out. Yeah, Mike Smith didn't sign the Beatles. Van Gogh, who some of you called out earlier, one of the all-time great artists, certainly one of the greats of the 20th century. Accounts differ, but it's largely thought he sold one painting in his lifetime, just one painting. So people get it wrong all the time. The ultimate arbiter of your work is not the critics or indeed your clients. It's you. You know how hard you've worked on this thing. You know how true you've been to yourself. That's the one opinion that really matters. So don't get too crippled by criticism when it comes, and it will inevitably come. But by the same token, if you're lucky enough to be taking home an award, don't get too puffed up by prizes either. A thing I've learned over time is that we, particularly in the creative process, we fixate on the outcome. We obsess about the success of the outcome. But actually, the more pleasure you take in the process, the less the outcome matters. Okay, I'm going to stop for a little commercial break. My wife has just started gardening, and hopefully he's not listening because that's really going to throw me. Here are some people in a room in Soho in the middle of one of my creative workshops, and I am holding 2 workshops this June. The first one, How to Have Better Ideas, is sold out, but there are 4 spaces left on Find a Fresh Approach to a Familiar Problem. So if you're in London on June the 12th and you would like to come along to a half-day workshop all about techniques and strategies for finding a fresh approach to do that thing that you've had to do a lot before, then I'm going to offer to you guys, because you're here, you've come to listen to me on a Friday afternoon, 10% off. So if you go to the website, in fact, there's a link. There we go. You can click on that if you want to, and sort that out afterwards. But yeah, there's a workshop. Maybe your boss would pay for it. I don't know. It would reflect well on them, wouldn't it? Jill says, I can totally recommend the workshops. Thank you, Jill. And I may do some online. Mark's already coming. Lovely. Thank you, Mark. I will do some online. Yes, absolutely. Number 6 is to embrace your limitations. I'm not a big practitioner of Aikido, but there's a lovely thing about Aikido that I discovered a little while ago that I really like. And this is Morihei Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido, and flinging somebody across a room. And in Aikido, there is this principle that the less we resist something, the less power it has over us. So there's no word for opponent or aggressor. It's simply the one who's giving the energy and the one who is transforming the energy. And I like this a lot because we all face limitations, and we go up against them, and the more we go up against them, the more we resist them, the bigger they become, and the more inertia there is. A few years ago now, I came across some photos on Instagram, and they really they made a big impression on me. They're these beautiful, spacious landscapes with this lovely kind of pastel palette, and beautifully composed, really, really lovely photos. And they're from all over the world, Alaska and Senegal and Chile and Mexico, everywhere you can imagine. But the really amazing thing about the photographs is not the images themselves, but the way that they were made. They come from the account of the agoraphobic traveler. Agoraphobia and anxiety limit my ability to travel, so I found another way to see the world. Hashtag Google Street View. So this is the account of Jackie Kenny. Jackie Kenny has worked as a photographer, has traveled extensively, but also experiences the anxiety disorder, agoraphobia. And when she's in that frame of mind, she travels the world online instead. And because she's got a photographer's eye, she couldn't help but screen grab some of the things that she was seeing. Over time, she built up this incredible library of images. The French said you should do something with them. And she's got over 130,000 followers. She's shown her work now in galleries in New York and Paris and London. She did a beautiful book, which is just over there, a couple of years ago. And I really love this story. Jackie says you don't have to let your limitations stop you achieving your goals. They don't define you. Sometimes you can make them work for you. And I don't know about you, but very often I've found that a limitation, sometimes an arbitrary limitation that I've put in place in the creative process, has taken me somewhere more interesting than I would have got without it. So long as I allow it to do that, so long as I work with it rather than resist it. Beethoven, deaf, later life, his later compositions are much more original because he couldn't hear what everybody else was doing. Matisse was confined to his bed. He couldn't stand at the easel later on in his life too, and he made the cutouts, which were hugely influential on the progress of modern art. Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath lost the tips of his fingers in an industrial accident just as the band were getting famous. Didn't give up. He detuned his guitar to C sharp so that less pressure was required to press the strings, and that distinctive sound that we know today as heavy metal was born out of that industrial accident and Tony's perseverance. He wouldn't give up, he just kept on going. Number 7, don't mind the gap. There's a lovely book by Kay Tempest, another of my creative heroes, and the book is all about the power of creativity to connect us. And in that book, Kay writes, there is no success in writing. There are only better degrees of failure. To write is to fail. An idea is a perfect thing. It comes to the writer in a breathless stream. The writer holds this idea in their mind, in their body. Everything feeds it. They've spent their entire lifetime up until that point honing the skills to get this idea out of the ether and down through their useless hands onto the page. But it will never be right. There is no way that a writer cannot injure that idea as they wrestle with it. And that's the thing, there's always this gap. The gap between the idea as it arrived in our minds, which is this beautiful, flawless, perfect thing, and then the thing you make, which is never going to be as good as the thing in your head, not least because the thing in your head is just a thing in your head. It doesn't actually exist. But this thing is now words on a page, or acrylic and oils on a canvas, or, something that's on the television. But the thing is, once you recognize there's going to be a gap, then when you see the gap, it's a little bit less painful. And so long as you keep going and you don't get too downhearted, then the gap starts to get a little bit smaller. There's always going to be a gap, but the more work you make, the smaller the gap will become. Here is the other film that I would like to show you today. It's Ira Glass, the creator of the This Is American Life podcast, talking about the gap.
Nobody tells people who are beginners, and I really wish somebody had told this to me, is that all of us who do creative work, like, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. But it's like there's a gap that for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good. Okay, it's not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer, and your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. And the thing I would just like say to you with all my heart is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste. They could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short. It didn't have this special thing that we wanted it to have. And the thing I would say to you is everybody goes through that. And for you to go through it, if you're going through it right now, if you're just getting out of that phase, you got to know it's totally normal. And the most important possible thing you could do is do a lot of work. Do a huge volume of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month you know you're going to finish one story. Because it's only by actually going through a volume of work that you're actually going to catch up and close that gap. And the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions. In my case, like I took longer to figure out how to do this than anybody I've ever met. It takes a while. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while, and you just have to fight your way through that. Okay?
Okay. Ira Glass. So let's return to the deck. And my final observation this afternoon, which is maybe failure's not so bad after all. Another of my creative heroes is the performance artist, Marina Abramovich. And she says, if you experiment, you have to fail. By definition, experimenting means going to territory where you've never been, where failure is very possible. And I think if there is anything that is going to define your success as a creative, it is your relationship with failure. I was reading a book last summer, a really great book by Adam Alter called Anatomy of a Breakthrough, and he is a psychological researcher, and he looks back at lots of great artistic and scientific careers, and he found that there's like a perfect ratio for failure, which is 1 in 6. Most of the successful people fail at something 1 every 6 goes. Like if you're failing less than that, he says, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. And if you're failing more than that, then you're overstretching. So you're going to have to fail now and again. And how should we deal with that? I'm going to tell a story now that I've told a few times. Regular listeners will have heard this story, but I think it's a wonderful one, and I share it with you now. It's a story about Cecilia Jimenez, who lives in a small town called Borja in northern Spain. And a few years ago, she was sheltering from the hot Spanish sun in her local church. And she felt a bit sad because as she sat there in the shadows, she was looking at a fresco of Jesus Christ, our Lord, on the wall. And the fresco was peeling. Now, Cecilia knew that there was no money in the church coffers. She was a volunteer for the church. She got married in this church. And she knew that there wasn't enough money to pay an artist to come in and restore it. So on that fateful afternoon, she decided that she was going to restore the painting herself. There we have it. I have to say that that Cecilia said she hadn't quite finished when her rendition of our Lord Jesus Christ went viral. It went really, really viral. The headline in Le Monde was "Holy shit!" On Saturday Night Live, they did a sketch called "Potato Jesus," and it became a meme. There is Leonardo's Last Supper. There is Edvard Munch's The Scream. We got the scene from Titanic with Leonardo sketching Kate as Potato Jesus, and my absolute favourite, which was Cecilia as Elliot from E.T. and Monkey Christ doing a very passable impersonation of E.T. there. This was pretty disastrous, you know. It was a well-intentioned creative endeavour on the part of Cecilia, which went spectacularly wrong. She went into hiding. She was devastated, you know. This was a church she loved, in a community she was very well known in, and she fucked things up. But about a couple of months or so after this had gone down, something unexpected happened. People started flocking to the previously neglected town of Borja because they all wanted to see Monkey Christ for themselves. And being tourists, well-heeled, they dropped a few euros in the collection box. Cecilia made the artwork in August. By Christmas that year, there was enough money in the church coffers to build an old people's home for the elderly in Borja, which they'd wanted to do for years, and to restore the church from top to bottom. But the only bit of the church they didn't restore was, boom, Cecilia's Monkey Christ. And you can still see it. I really must make the pilgrimage there one day. Indeed, in Las Vegas this year, there is an opera about Cecilia's story, which is so bonkers. It has to be true. So Miles Davis, he puts it like this. It's true, Rich. There really is. Maybe it'll be online someday. It's not the note you play that's the wrong note. It's the note you play afterwards that makes it right or wrong. I heard a quote yesterday that I put on LinkedIn today, which is, people who say nice guys always lose don't know where the finishing line is, which I think is really lovely, you know. There are objective failures, you know, like a surgeon fails to save somebody's life, your football team, Leeds United, fails to qualify for the Premier League. But most failures are subjective, you know. It's where an event has not lived up to our expectations, therefore we deem it a failure. But sometimes that thing that feels like a huge mistake or failure can turn out to be really good in the fullness of time, as indeed Cecilia's mistake was. We're almost there, and there is going to be some time for questions. For now, I would like to trailer my next webinar. If you would like to come along to another one of these, if you can cope with me waffling for another 47 minutes, then it's going to be on Friday, June the 28th. I'm going to address the question of what makes great work great. What are the essential ingredients in great creative work, and how could you amplify those in your own work? So you can sign up there. If you think this is any good, then please share it with your mates. And if you think it wasn't, then tell me and I'll make it better next time. Quick recap then, and before I share my final thing. We're all insecure, every one of us. Anybody who says they're not insecure is pretending. Deep down, they are. A little self-doubt can be a good thing. It shows you're in a spot where you might do something interesting, and that you've got the judgment to see how you need to grow. Too much is crippling, and there are ways around it, as we've discussed. No one alive is youer than you. Use that world-beating advantage. Try and do something daily-ish, some low-profile, personal, creative project that's easy to complete. It will get you unstuck. Opinions are not facts. They're only ever opinions. Embrace your limitations. Work with them. Allow them to take you somewhere more interesting than you might otherwise have got. Remember K Tempest. Don't mind the gap. There's always going to be a gap. Just keep going and the gap gets smaller. Thank you, Sarah. And a mistake one day may be your greatest asset. Final thought is, you know, creative confidence is kind of the phrase, isn't it? And I was listening to my friend Steve Brewer talk about a woman he'd interviewed who does a podcast, whose name escapes me, Designers Podcast. And she was saying, is confidence the right word? You know, because confidence comes from having done something before. Creativity is about doing something for the first time. So you can't be confident about it because you've never done it before. Courage is a better word, you know. Confidence is hard to drum up, but courage, if I take a deep breath and go, come on, Richard, you can look into your laptop camera for an hour and talk to a bunch of strangers, or be they friendly strangers, then I can kind of drum that up. So maybe creative courage is what we should be talking about. There's a book. I've mentioned the book. Here's the book. Buy the book. It's all right. Creative Demons and How to Slay Them. Find it on my website. There's my website. You can find out more about the workshops that I run for teams, the individual creative coaching that I do. There's a blog. There are articles. You can sign up for my newsletter and get a free ebook as well. You'll find me on Instagram, Richard Holman Creativity. I'm on X. I'm on YouTube. I'm also on LinkedIn. Any of these places, please connect. We can chat. Thank you, Fiona. The 6 stages of the creative process. Are we ready? The 6 stages of the creative process. This is also something I found online. I love it because it's true. This is awesome. This is tricky. This is shit. I'm shit. This might be okay. This is awesome. And, you know, so easy to get stuck in that middle bit, isn't it? You know, we've all been there. Maybe you're there today. You're right in the thick of it. But I guess all I'm here to say is creativity is a wonderful thing. It is one of the best things we human beings do. We need your creativity. So just keep going. Put one foot in front of the other, and all being well, you will arrive at the end. That's it from me. It's 1:51. Thanks, guys, for the nice comments. Cheers. Thank you. I am going to hang around for a few more minutes, just in case there are any questions. And loads of love, you know, to my fellow creative people, wherever you are. Have a great weekend. You know, if you enjoyed this, please do spread the word, because it's how I make me living. Thanks, Jose or Jose. That's a double-edged compliment, though, isn't it? I didn't know it was your book when I joined for this webinar. I just realised I bought it on a charity shop a little while ago. Still have to read it. Thanks, man. Who sold it to the charity shop, though? Christ, it should be there on the shelves permanently. There's a Bible of creativity. Thank you, Jose, for buying it. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you, Mark and Kate. Oh, thanks, Elena. That's really nice. Any questions about any of this before I head off and drink a nice cold pint in the sunshine? Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Stephen. That's a nice way of seeing it. That's a good way of looking at it, isn't it? It wasn't in the bargain bucket. That's the place you don't want to be, isn't it? Charity shop's fine. It's the bargain bucket. Cheers, Jason. Yeah, my wife actually, I think maybe she realised that it was throwing me a bit. So, Dan, will I be doing some more courses after June in the capital? Probably, yeah. I've actually had quite a good take up on these. So if you would be interested, then send me an email and I will let you know. Thank you, Jose. Yeah, I'm doing like 2 workshops with 16 people in each, and yeah, I've just got 4 spaces left. So that suggests that, you know, there's an appetite for them. Cheers, Rich. I will indeed. Cool. Well, it looks like there's no questions. Bye, Dilek. I hope it's not too hot in Dubai. Cheers, Dan. Thank you, Stephen. I hope my shirt today lived up to your expectations. Cheers, Ollie. Cool. Thanks, man. Finiston, this one, which is I think Scottish, actually, your neck of the woods. Right, I'm going to bugger off. Loads of love. Thanks, guys. Take care, and hopefully see you for the next one.